The fashion industry is one of the most polluting in the world. It's also an industry that takes a massive toll on the people who work in it. This is why Josh Gelder started The Fision, a radically transparent and 100% traceable t-shirt company that's leveraging the world's first and only climate-positive cotton. Beyond the cotton, Josh and the team are also using some very futuristic tech that allows consumers to see exactly where the cotton in each garment comes from. Check out this episode for some mind-blowing stats about the fashion industry and to learn about what's being done to turn things around. Hey, Josh, thanks so much for joining the Sustainability Champions podcast. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of
Very
course.
excited to meet your listeners.
Appreciate that. They're very excited to meet you too. So the way I like to start these conversations is by taking a step back and looking at kind of the bigger picture of what the Fision is and what you're working on. So what is the elevator pitch, if you will, for the Fision?
Well, the Fision is a 100% traceable, radically transparent apparel company. We've really tried to utilize the newest and latest technologies to showcase to consumers what's possible. And at the same time, take that opportunity to also educate consumers about all the various problems from the current fashion industry.
Great. Very succinct. Very nice. And so if we start with that last piece about educating on the major challenges and problems with conventional fashion for the environment, and I imagine this is also what inspired creating the Fision in the first place. If we start with that, what are some of the major challenges with fashion? And I suppose just to set the scene, I know myself that fashion is like either top 2 or top 3 most polluting industries in the world.
Yeah, and it's funny, that is, as we were getting started and talking to various people regarding what we were doing, it's so apparent that most people have no idea how terrible the apparel industry actually is for both pollution reasons as well as social issues. It's literally a third of the microplastics in the ocean. It's 20% of industrial water pollution. It's the second largest consumer of water in the world. It's 17% of worldwide employment. Less than 2% of those make a living wage. And all of this has been really compounded by fast fashion and this, disposable mentality. It really has exacerbated the problem. And just as an example, in the US alone, we're wearing 5 times more clothing than we did even 10 years ago. And the average number of wears is 7 times before it's being discarded in landfills across the world. In fact, 85% of clothing that's produced is disposed of within 12 months. So it's really a large worldwide problem. It hits so many different areas. It's quite frankly, it can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah, that is a lot of issues. And yeah, it is. Did I get that right? 17% is global employment, and less than 2% of people working in fashion are actually receiving a living wage.
Yes, unfortunately, and that's part of why we did what we're doing. This worldwide supply chain and all the different third world countries involved. It's extremely opaque. And part of really the baseline for sustainability has to be transparency, right?
Yeah,
and tracing the origins of that fabric. I know there's been so many different cases. I know most recently it was organic cotton coming out of India that was not legitimate, and it caused a whole issue. So these are the type of reasons why you actually want to trace the origins of your garments.
and yeah, to the point of that, and I do want to explore the term specifically that you said was radically transparent, which I've heard the word transparent or as a term used, but radically transparent makes transparent sound like child's play. So if we start with the materials that are used and And the Fission has something called Good Earth Cotton, and then we can go into the radically transparent part. So what are the materials used in the clothing that the Fission makes?
Right. So we're using 80% Good Earth cotton. Now, Good Earth cotton is absolutely one of the most innovative cotton producers in the world. They're one of the first and only where they're producing carbon sequestering cotton. So it actually sequesters more carbon than the entire growth life cycle emits. In fact, if you look at like a traditional bale of cotton, it emits approximately 260 kilograms of carbon into the atmosphere, where Good Earth cotton actually sequesters around 330 kilograms of carbon. And the other 20%, we actually used recycled cotton. And part of that is again, we're encouraging circularity, which is a big buzzword in the industry today. You know, the current models are what I like to call extractive models,
Yep.
you know, all the way through disposal. And I think one of the absolute key critical elements with all the innovation going on today is how do you ultimately become circular?
Yeah, and the word circularity, that was one of the things I was thinking of, that term I was thinking about as you were talking about all the waste from whether it's plastic or water pollution or, you know, garments being worn only 7 times per average before being thrown away. Circularity is a big topic now, and I think there's a lot to look into there. But just in terms of specifically sourcing and continuing down the track of radically transparent. So Good Earth Cotton, is that, I'm actually not familiar. So is Good Earth Cotton a company, or is that like an accreditation that any cotton
Yes,
grower
no,
can?
it's a company, and they're
Okay.
actually leveraging the technology to other parts of the world. It started in Australia
Hmm.
on a farm. But part of when we talk about the radical transparency is proving the origins that we're actually using the cotton that we say we are. And so we've partnered with a company called Fiber Trace, and they're embedding the cotton during the ginning process um, with what we call a tracer. And that tracer then can be verified at each and every step in our supply chain. So we're using a verified Fiber Trace verified. So at literally every step from ginning on through spinning, weaving, cutting, sewing, dyeing, etc., we are scanning that cotton or where it is in the process, and it's picking up that DNA tracer so that we can prove that it's the actual cotton that we say it is.
Wow. And now I understand why you call it radically transparent, because that's
Yeah, so we combine that with blockchain,
oh wow.
right? And so blockchain is basically, for your listeners that don't know it, I know it's sometimes a complicated term that gets caught up, with Bitcoin and some of the cryptocurrencies, but it's basically a decentralized and shared digital ledger to record transactions. And in this case, FiberTrace, and what's so innovative about what they've done is they've basically married the physical with the digital by using these tracers and the scanning process.
Yeah, that's amazing. And because the blockchain part is there, is the end user, so for instance, if I buy a t-shirt from you, is there any way for me to scan a QR code or something and see, yeah, the path of all that?
Absolutely, and that's what's certainly unique about our company. We've our logo on the exterior of our garment is a QR code. We use that QR code so that the consumer can follow the journey of their garment from where it started in Australia through the spinning process, et cetera, by just scanning that. At the same time, part of what we spoke about earlier in the conversation was educating, right? And one of the keys to us at the Fision is we're very clear that there is not a large enough awareness of all the problems that this industry causes. When we rattled through those statistics, they're astounding. And we're convinced that the more people we make aware of this problem, the more people will change purchasing behaviors. And that's really, a critical element to make this change.
And I've spoken to quite a number of professionals in quote unquote sustainability, whatever that really means. And one of the questions I used to ask was, what's the most important thing that people can do about having a positive impact on the planet? And frequently the answer was get educated. And the more I think about it, the more I agree with that, because on one hand, you have to get educated to understand what the problems are so that you know what to address. And then the second thing is you need to, once you understand what the problems are, then you understand, or at least you can educate yourself on what solutions are there. And, in your case, you learn about the challenges of the cotton growing industry. Fashion itself has issues all along the supply chain, but it starts with cotton as well. It requires so many. Agriculturally, it's quite destructive, and so you learn about that, and then you learn actually there's a company that's taking action. It's called Good Earth Cotton, and that's why I think education is such a critical component to
right. And they're
sustainability.
using everything, regenerative farming
That's awesome.
techniques, solar energy. It's really advanced, and they're just at the forefront of this entire movement.
And in terms of educating, so that QR code is really an important part of your education process, I imagine, because not only does it have, well, go on.
Yeah, so we have a video that we've put together that again talks about a lot of the statistics that we covered earlier in our conversation to make people aware of this problem. So as they wear our t-shirt, part of it is, please, the idea is have people, when they see it and they're like, oh, wait, why do you have a QR code on your shirt? Please let them scan it to help amplify this problem.
It's a really easy way to do it with the QR code, because it allows you to get on your mobile device and start accessing a lot of data and information. Are there any other ways that you're educating consumers beyond just the QR code on the shirt or on the
Well, sure.
garment?
We're trying to get out there, obviously doing podcasts and other media to again try and communicate to your audience, to everyone, that this is a real problem. And unlike a lot of the problems related to climate change, this to me is one of the easiest to change, right? This is all about individual decisions. And it's not that difficult. Some of the other ones are a little more challenging and certainly more expensive.
And when you're talking about this, you're referring to clothing and fashion?
Yes.
It's an interesting point, because as you said, fast fashion was such a big, fast fashion is huge now, and the companies associated with fast fashion are ubiquitous, and they're, certainly in the Western hemisphere or in the global North, it's everywhere. Whether you're in the US or Canada or Europe, you see the same big fast fashion brands everywhere. And that's I would imagine, I'm curious to know your thoughts as someone who's looking for or creating an alternative. It's a pretty big mountain to climb, when you see these huge stores that have sometimes 5 stories and they're just fast fashion brands, and they're in every major city in the US and in Europe. How do you approach that? How do you think about, changing that?
Well, again, I think it's particularly important to understand that a lot of greenwashing is happening today, right? Companies pretending they're sustainable, or really what they'll do is let's call it a capsule collection, right? I remember passing a fast fashion company at the beginning of this, and right in the window, and this is, I won't get into the actual organization, but it was so egregious. It had sustainable capsule collection right in the window. But the other 99% of what they're doing is terrible for the environment. So they're playing this game, right? Where yes, they have a few styles, but the other 99% of what they do is not there. And I think that you're seeing laws are changing, which is big. Europe just made some major changes, or in the process of doing. There's the New York Fashion Act, which we certainly support. which hopefully at some point is going to level the playing field for everyone. Because right now, to do what we're doing is expensive. Right? We're embedding a ton of technology. We have unique QR codes. We've built apps. We've done a lot of things that are adding to the expense. And our true goal is in my mind and in our minds, right? It's sustainability cannot be a luxury. It can't be. And we only have 6 years left until we're hitting 2030. And it's that point of no return from a science perspective. And so really now is the time that we all have to, look in the mirror and make individual changes to how we're currently living.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, especially with that phrase of sustainability cannot be a luxury. I think it just needs to be a way that it's done naturally. And just going back to the technology, you mentioned that there's a lot in there. We've talked about blockchain. We've talked about how FiberTrace incorporates its, trace tech into the cotton from the ginning process, and you can track it all the way through. But you've also mentioned apps, and there's other potential technology that we haven't covered. What else have you got up your sleeve?
Well, so right now we also, again, things unseen by, say, a consumer, you start with 3D development and virtual fittings and things that, in the traditional sense, when I look at, and I've been doing this for a long time now, with samples going back and forth out of the country, sample after sample, fitting after fitting, now it's amazing what you can do virtually with all this 3D imaging and bodies. I mean, we've done a lot of great things. Wow. And it's cut down not only on the time to development, but also, the cost and obviously the environmental impact.
Yeah, I think, and that's where technology becomes really powerful, because it just makes life easier for everyone on so many different levels.
And when I think about that, that's really one of the main reasons we started this. Right. When we looked at the supply chain that is out there today, I felt like it's like a time warp going back to the 70s. Right. And it's just set up so old school. And when we started, we were like, with today's technology and where things are, if you could just start fresh without all these legacy problems, you could be so much more efficient. I mean, everything from even like we work from wherever. We don't have an office. We work virtually, right? So these are things that cut down on carbon impact, obviously change from a lifestyle perspective, but it's also the technology that's available today.
Absolutely. And we absolutely must take advantage of it, because it really helps things move faster collaboratively. We're able to work together, solve problems more effectively and efficiently. If we look at the other side of the supply chain, because so far we've touched on the growing process. We've talked a bit, although we should probably dig into it a little bit more, but about how the product is made, but also sustainable packaging is an important component, because ultimately, there is no storefront. It sounds like it's global, or at least nationwide. So how do you make sure that the packaging that you use is sustainable and not harming the environment?
So, again, at the beginning of our organization, we tried to do everything as purposeful and intentional as we could. And the packaging, I think, is a great example. We use a company called Better Packaging Co. And they are taking ocean-bound plastic pollution in Southeast Asia, coastal communities. They've actually created an economy around it because they've guaranteed purchasing it. So they're creating jobs. At the same time, they're solving an environmental problem. And that's what we're using for our poly bags and our exterior packaging, shipping direct to consumer, which is fantastic. It's Southeast Asia is where 80% of the plastics actually enter the ocean. And this is the lowest carbon form of packaging commercially available today. It's actually 75% less carbon than a traditional packaging. And even when you look at, say, 100% recycled paper, it's 30% less carbon emitted compared to that.
Wow.
So it's a fantastic organization. It's a D Corp. And these are the type of partners we've really tried to get involved with and innovate with. And we're certainly, listen, we don't have all the answers. That's what's so interesting to me. We are just at the beginning of what we're trying to do. It is, if I look at like the long-term goal, we talked about wanting to ultimately be, 100% circular. I also am a big believer in on-demand production. That's come a long way. You talk about interesting technologies and what's happening. But one of the largest problems when you look at today's supply chain, it's basically a 12-month supply chain from design to the end. And so you can't possibly know what the trends are going to be, what colors are happening, but you're ordering this a year ahead of time. So built into this whole system is a bunch of waste, right? If you're a great merchant, you're right 60% of the time. So what happens to that other 40%?
Wow.
Right? So when I look at on-demand production and where technology is going, and again, the costs maybe are still a little bit prohibitive, but they're going to get there. And when they do, why would you ever create supply before you know your demand? Right? Talk about zero waste. At the same time, why would you put your supply chain halfway across the world if you could do it in your backyard? Right? Because it's no longer then about cheap labor, right? It's about capital investment.
And are these things that you're looking to solve? I mean, are you working on this right now?
So we have played around with a couple of different organizations that are involved in on-demand production. So that's not what we're yet doing. Again, as I mentioned, the technology is a little bit cost prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
Again, all these technologies are amazing. However, some of this can still drive cost up. And then all of a sudden you're competing, and we're doing t-shirts, right? So you're competing against fast fashion companies, et cetera. And what are consumers willing to pay for?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with fashion, I mean, to your point, and this reminds me of the challenge with organic food as well, is the cost associated with it. If you just need to buy a t-shirt and you just need it for nothing special, and you go to a fast fashion brand where they're selling a t-shirt for $5, and then you have a t-shirt that has all of this tech involved. It's so good for the environment, for the people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it costs 6 to 10 times more than that fast fashion t-shirt. It becomes very challenging, especially if they look close enough, they look similar enough functionality wise, they're identical. Maybe the more expensive one will last a bit longer, but if you're going to wear it only a handful of times anyway, it's a really big thing. And then it becomes that sustainable clothing is considered a luxury item because, $50 t-shirt, for instance, or a $30 t-shirt. I mean, that's not in everyone's budget,
Absolutely, which is, again, why our long-term goal is to continue to, build a market, let as many people understand what they're supporting and why. From the beginning of this, we set up as a public benefit corporation with a give back model.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope that there's enough consumers out there that can afford it to help us then drive it further and drive the price point even lower.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I can see as the on-demand production technology becomes less and less cost prohibitive. In theory, actually, that should drive the cost down because it means that you're required to purchase substantially less material because you're not buying enough material for 1 million t-shirts. You're buying enough material for maybe 1,000 that you just make very quickly. Only when the time is needed. Plus, you don't have to ship it from across the world. So in theory, you can see, but it seems like a lot of infrastructure first needs to be developed before it gets to that point.
Absolutely, but I do foresee in the long term, or not even the long term, probably the midterm, where that is what the reality that these supply chains will become much shorter, much more localized
Yeah.
and much more nimble than they are today.
We're seeing it, just going back to the food, we're seeing something similar to this in food as well, although not unanimously, but certainly with like microgreens, where companies are starting to build basically in warehouses. They're building indoor vertical farms, and you can have a vertical farm smack in the middle of any city as long as you can get enough space for it. And that way, you can also do on-demand harvesting. So if your client, which is a restaurant that is 2 blocks away, needs extra salad, they can just call you and say, hey, we need extra salad like now. And then you just deliver it right then and there. And it really
Right.
reduces the waste. So
Absolutely same concepts.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where we see everything going in the hopefully very near future.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that you could do that with fashion.
With fashion. So one of the things, like right now, we started with t-shirts. Right. And that was actually very purposeful, right? A t-shirt is something that appeals to obviously a wide range of consumers, covers a ton of different demographics, because that's really what we were looking for, a product that we could search for at the end of the day, people or an audience with like-minded values having nothing to do with those traditional demographics. And, you know, one of the things that is challenging, as you could tell when we went through having to verify and scan and embed DNA tracers into the ginning process, et cetera, it's very complex to build this level of traceability and transparency into the supply chain. So we wanted to start with a single fabrication. Right. And cotton, being that it's currently 25% of the fiber market, seemed like a good place. At the same time, cotton is obviously biodegradable as it's a natural product.
So as we're doing a little bit of future gazing, what is next for the Fision? What are you seeing as your short term or mid or long term goals that you're working on?
Well, I think our long-term goal, as I mentioned earlier in our call, is, you know, ultimately be on demand and circular. At the same time, having verifiable traceability and verification through every part of the process.
And will you expand beyond t-shirts, or is that really where you're starting?
So yeah, we're actually.
Function?
So on our direct-to-consumer site, we started with t-shirts. We have several different styles. We did a couple of graphic tees that are kind of related, that are fun to what we do. One was fashion as a social movement. It spells out Fision in those letters. We did a couple other dirt to shirt. There's another cute one with some mushrooms. We had wear responsibly in rainbow colors. So kind of going along with our theme, as well as we do, regular navy, white, black. We did a razor pink, which is one of the popular colors this summer. But the other thing that we're doing is, by creating t-shirt, this is also like a blank canvas for custom product. And so one of the things that we're offering, and we've had a lot of interest from different promotional companies, we're looking for partnerships with other brands to do collaborations, or corporations, or even nonprofits, because not only can we do custom graphics, but because of our unique QR code that we're creating for each purchase order, we can also tie in dynamic marketing materials for the company. And that's where we built the app that we brought up earlier in the conversation. They can use that easy use upload tool and actually change some things really almost daily if they wanted to. So you can imagine some of the creative things people can do. We're happen to be with an influencer group right now that has about 15 different influencers and 150 plus million followers that we're doing a program with. And what they're doing is each day they're one of the influencers creating the content of the day. And so they're changing that daily. So it gives people really a reason to, want to purchase and interact with their audience on a regular basis. But whether you did it with something like that, or it was for an event and you did a video after the event so people could relive the experience along with the t-shirts, et cetera, there's all sorts of creative things you can do.
Yeah, that's super cool. And it's a great way to, first of all, get the word out about the t-shirt while also the marketing side of it and working with, well, I think it's amazing that you're working with influencers that give you such a broad reach, especially considering the importance of education as one of the values of the Fision.
Well, and that's part of what this whole influencer group is trying to do. So it happens to be a great tie-in, and that's really what we're looking for: are like-minded communities, like-minded companies, right? That are really on the same page as we are, want to be innovative, and want to help solve this problem.
Yeah, fantastic. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about the Fision, where can people go, and how can people follow you on social media?
So certainly you can go to our website, www.thefision.com. That's with one S. Or they can see us on Instagram at thefisionco. I'm sorry, at thefisionco.
Excellent. Well, I think it's always nice when the website and the handles are very similar. It keeps things easy, and we'll of course include those links in the show notes for this episode. But Josh, thank you so much for your time. I think the work that you're doing in terms of moving fashion as an industry forward with technology and really going for this radical transparency is crucial. It's I think it's companies like yours that are really pushing the boundaries as far as possible that end up really making the shift in an industry possible. It's kind of like an icebreaker that you just have to crack that, and then everyone else can follow.
Well, thank you. Yes, we hope this becomes the baseline for the industry, because it really that's what needs to establish to really move into a fully sustainable apparel fashion supply chain.
I hope so. Well, thank you again, Josh. It was great speaking with you, and best of luck as you continue changing the industry for the better.
Thank you so much for having us.